Well, hello everyone. This is Tommy Hensel and welcome to today's installment of Table for One, Please. What I'm going to be attempting to cook today, I've actually done it before, but I think today will be another interesting experiment, is something that's way more than enough for a single person to eat alone. I'm making paella, which of course is going to be a giant pan. So luckily I love it and it will be left over for the rest of the week and I'll have a good time. But I wanted to make this because I've had a lot of people post recently in response to a paella post that I did that they've never tried it before because they think it's really super complicated. And I would say it's moderately complicated, but once you've got some of the techniques down, it's really not all that difficult. Now, of course, traditional paella is cooked in a special pan. I do not have a paella pan, maybe someday, but in my kitchen I don't have any more room for anything. So I'm going to be using this, oh my gosh, it's heavy, cast iron pan. It's awesome for paella, and one of the things that makes traditional paella so exciting is the crusty bit at the bottom that's called the socarat when you make a paella, and you actually can get a good socarat in a cast iron pan. So I'm going to be using the cast iron pan. Also behind me on the stove, you'll see a large saucepan. That has 7 cups of stock in it. I'm using an actual, I used the Better Than Bouillon fish stock for this. You can use any kind of stock that you like, depending on what you're putting in the paella, but because I'm using shrimp today, I decided to go with a fish stock. But let's look at some of the other ingredients that I'm going to be using in paella. First of all, I am going to be using a little bit of rosé wine at one point in the recipe, and of course, since it's paella, I picked a Spanish rosé of Tempranillo. This is a 2017 Finca Angera, which is arguably a little bit past its prime as far as drinking. It's still okay, but I definitely need to drink this now and not later, but it's great for cooking because it still tastes pretty good. I do not have the traditional bomba rice, but I do have arborio rice, which is really the next best alternative. It's super short grain, and it gives you what you need in the paella. For this particular one, I am doing shrimp and chorizo. It's really important that if you do chorizo that you get the really traditional Spanish cured, dry cured chorizo, not the Mexican chorizo, because the Mexican chorizo is actually ground up, and when you try to cut it, it's not going to go into the paella well, but this works great. I'll be using just a little bit over half of that. I'm also using, this is about 12 ounces of shrimp. I bought this in my last Imperfect Foods order, so it's considered to be broken shrimp, but honestly they're pretty whole. I thawed them out and drained them, so I'll be using shrimp in this paella. I'm also going to be adding sliced green beans. I used the frozen ones and just thawed them out. This is about a quarter pound. You can use fresh green beans if you want, and honestly that's better, but this is what I had. Also a cup of frozen peas that I've thawed out, so nice sweet peas will go in there. I'm going to throw olives in this. Normally I would use the big green olives, but what I had in the refrigerator were just traditional manzanilla olives stuffed with pimento. So that's a little bit, maybe about a third of a cup of olives, and I just sliced them in half. Salt, pepper, Spanish paprika, sorry, not Hungarian, this is Spanish paprika, and of course saffron. Now saffron is expensive, but it's worth it if you're going to do this recipe or some other things. I do not recommend using turmeric as an alternative to get the color because the flavor of turmeric is going to completely change the flavor profile. If you do not have saffron, skip that step and just don't put it in. It'll still be a really tasty dish, but honestly I think that both the color and the flavor of saffron are pretty amazing. I'm also going to be using some roasted red peppers. I made my own, and this is about, I don't want to say, about 4 ounces. That's about enough for this. You can use the jarred kind, just slice them. If you notice, I've sliced them into really kind of small slices. That'll go on. Now, one of the major, not secret, but I guess it's a secret ingredient if you've never used it before, is sofrito. I made my sofrito in advance, and I actually used the sofrito from this recipe book from Bocaria Restaurant. This is an awesome cookbook, by the way. If you can get a copy of this, run out and buy it. amazing traditional Spanish cooking, particularly focused on tapas, but many other things. And they do have great paella recipes in this, but I'm using, I'll tell you about my paella recipe, but I do like their sofrito recipe because it's really simple. Sofrito is a very simple thing that's used as the base in paella and some other things in Spanish cooking. All it is pureed tomatoes, onions, and garlic, pureed together and cooked in oil. The trick is to make a really good sofrito. You can make it on the fly when you do paella, but honestly, I think it's better to make it in advance. You'll see this is about a pound of tomato, half a pound of onion, and about 3 garlic cloves with a quarter cup, or excuse me, a half a cup of oil. And you can notice it cooked down a lot because what you do is you puree it, put it in a saucepan, bring it to a simmer, and then lower the heat and simmer it for about 3 hours, slowly, stirring it occasionally until it turns into kind of a jam. It's kind of a tomato onion jam. It's incredibly densely flavored, and it's a perfect base for paella. When you use it, you don't use a lot of it. I'll probably only use a quarter cup or so of that. The rest of it, if you're going to do something like paella later in the week, you can use it, or you can freeze in small batches. Or honestly, what I'll probably do with it is use it as either a sauce for pizza, awesome for that, or as the beginning of a tomato sauce for pasta. It's a great densely flavored thing. So those are my raw ingredients for the paella. I will be highlighting as I go through the day, as I go through this process. So enjoy, bon appetit, or as I always say, I am always epicuriously yours. And I'll be back in just a little while with the first step in the cooking process. Hello everyone, I'm back, and as you can see I have relocated the camera in my kitchen so we can look at the stove. I apologize if I occasionally look down because my screen is down there and it's hard for me not to look at myself. Not from a egotistical point of view, but just to make sure that what I'm doing you can see. But I think I can probably stay focused where I need to. So what we're going to do now is start the assembly process of the paella. You'll notice I have the stock heating. It doesn't need to be boiling hot, but it definitely needs to be hot because when you add it, you don't want it to slow down and stop the cooking process of the rice. So that's actually it's not even quite at a simmer, so I'm just going to leave it alone. The first thing I'm going to do is saute the chorizo and the shrimp. I put maybe a couple of tablespoons of oil in there. Chorizo is going to release a lot of oil, and I do like to use my brush to make sure that the oil is evenly distributed around the pan and not clumping up in the middle. All right. All right, so the oven is currently preheated to 450 degrees. This recipe is one that I've amalgamated from about 6 different paella recipes, but one of my favorites is Sandra Valvasori's recipe. She cooks it on a grill, so that's awesome if you want to do it outside because then you get that smoky flavor, but it works great in the oven. So I'm going to be assembling it on the stove almost till it's done and then putting it in the oven for a while and then bringing it back out to make sure that all the liquid has evaporated. So we're going to start first on the stove. And as I said, I've got a couple of tablespoons of olive oil in there. I'm going to be sauteing the chorizo for just a couple of minutes. All you want the chorizo is already pre-cooked. So you're not actually cooking it in order to make it safe to eat. You're actually cooking it to release some of those wonderful oils and also just to heat it up. It's going to go obviously into the paella and cook for a little while longer. So we're going to be cooking the chorizo for about 2 to 3 minutes. So I'm going to just leave it there for a second. I'm just going to let it sit and then I'll turn it in a minute. What we have here are the shrimp, and we've got the sofrito. What I have here is a 1/4 teaspoon of the saffron crushed, and I added a 1/4 cup of boiling water, and I'm just letting that steep for a little while because it's going to be poured into the mixture in a little while. And I have my 2½ cups of arborio rice. One of the tricks to making paella is, as opposed to risotto, is that at a certain point in making paella, you stop stirring the rice. You leave it alone, because if you don't, you will have saffron flavored risotto, which is not what you want. I'm sure that's really tasty, but that's not what we're looking for here. We're looking for something much different than that. So I'm going to be sauteing the chorizo for a couple of minutes. As I said, the oven is preheated to 450. I've got 7 cups of stock, that's fish stock over there. With this, because we're using chorizo, you could use vegetable stock or chicken stock would be fine. Like I said, I just thought that the turkey sounded, or not turkey, I have turkey stock in the freezer too, that the fish stock sounds pretty good. So all I'm doing is turning these over. They brown very, very quickly, and I slice them kind of on the bias, relatively thin. You can make your chorizo as chunky as you want to, and sometimes you see big chunks of it in paella. I tend to like it in slightly smaller bite-sized portions, kind of like you can see that size. It's not very big. All I'm doing is turning it over, and by the time I finish turning all of these little pieces, and again, this is about 4 to 5 ounces of chorizo. I'm going to turn on my vent here because I am generating lots of smoke. All right, there's my chorizo, and what you'll notice when you cook chorizo is the smell is lovely. You're also releasing those really spicy oils into the dish. Honestly, that is probably just enough. Oops, I'm going to use the smaller bowl. And I'm going to turn the heat down just a little bit. Let me just get these out. You can see those oils have released. The shrimp need to go in for just a skinny minute. They will cook really, really quickly. But you'll notice, if you can't see, oh yeah, you can see, they're picking up some of the color from that chorizo oil. Really lovely. The shrimp are going to cook again in the recipe a little bit later. So I'm basically stir frying these really quickly, and that's enough. We do not want to overcook the shrimp. Shrimp, like scallops for me, just become awful when they're overcooked. They become leathery and incredibly unappetizing. So there we have it. All right. All right, there's our shrimp set aside. All right, next we're going to add in the sofrito. Oh, and let me get my rosé. I threw it in the refrigerator. And of course I can't open it. All right, I'm going to deglaze the pan with a little bit of rosé. Maybe that's about 1/4 to 1/3 of a cup. Just to add a little bit of flavor. And obviously it'll cook out. Oh, that's boiling. Well, I'm making a big mess. That's boiling, so I don't want that to boil. All right, I'm going to use a decent amount. Let's see, there we go. I'm going to turn this up a little bit. All right, I'm going to use 1, 2, 3. I'm going to do about 4 tablespoons of sofrito. in that. Now, the sofrito needs to cook for a few minutes. So I'm going to dial out for a second and come back and we'll move on to the next step. So I'm going to be just washing the sofrito and sauteing it lightly, and I'll be back in a minute. All right, everyone, I'm back. I have been stirring the sofrito for a second. Now, I'm going to add in 2 teaspoons of smoky Spanish paprika, and I'm going to add in the reserved saffron water. Ooh, look at that color, you can see it. I hate to waste that. So I'm going to put a little tiny bit of stock in there just to swish it around. There we go. I'll leave that off. All right, so now I've added that, and this is a good time to add just a dash of cracked black pepper. I actually use a peppercorn blend. And a little hint of salt. The reason I do that is that when you make the sofrito, you do not season it. It's just tomatoes, onions, and garlic and oil. So there's no salt and pepper. You want that flavor to be as pure as possible in the sofrito, because then you can add whatever you want to. But if you put too much salt or pepper in it, then it can overpower a dish. So don't season the sofrito. Wait and season it once you have added it into the dish. All right, so I've stirred that to combine. Now I'm going to add the 2½ cups of rice. And you want to make sure that you stir the rice around to fully integrate it with this beautiful tomatoey sauce. Just make sure all of it has a little tomatoey color to it. Yummy. I wish that you could smell this because it smells awesome. All right. So you can see all of the sofrito has integrated with the arborio rice. And again, bomba is the preferred rice, but if you can't get that, arborio is great. Now, what I'm going to be doing is adding stock. You want to add hot stock. We're going to start with 5 cups of stock. This is a ½ cup measure, so I'm going to be putting 10 of these in. I'm making a mess. There we go, 10-ish. Have a bay leaf in there too, because I kind of like that. Now, this is the last time you're going to stir your rice. You want to make sure that the rice is evenly distributed. Oops, see, I'm making a big mess, but that's all right. That's what cleaning is for. All right, I am putting the spoon away. That is the last time you stir paella. Done. The rest of the time is cooking and assembly on top, but you're not going to stir it anymore. If you start to stir it, then you're going to release all of those starches in the rice, and it's going to become like risotto, which is all creamy and starchy, but that's not what you want. So you have to resist the urge, because it's hard resisting the urge to stir. So what I'm going to do is bring that to a light boil, lower it, and simmer for a while. As the water reduces, I'm then going to add more stock. But I'll come back at that point, I'll come back and show you the process. So I'm going away, and I'll be back in just a little while after this has had a chance to reduce. So I wanted to bring you back for just a second so you can see it's come to a gentle boil. And I'm going to let it well, more like a simmer, but it's kind of a boil. So I'm going to let it gently boil for about 7 to 10 minutes. And then it should be reducing enough for me to start slowly adding more stock in. So what I'll do is add a little bit more stock, like you do with risotto. Instead of stirring it, I'll just let it reduce, and then add a little more and let it reduce until I've got all 7 cups of stock in there. So I'll be back in a little while once we've gotten past that point. Okay, we're back. I'm going to turn this off. I'm getting ready to take this and put it, you can see that the liquid has reduced considerably. I am now going to sprinkle on green beans. And I'm going to sprinkle on these red peppers. Again, I roasted these myself, tried to chop them up, try to scatter them around as best as possible. All right. Now I'm going to take this and put it in the preheated 450-degree oven. It's heavy, be warned. All right, that's in the oven. I'm going to let it cook for about 10 to 12 minutes. Well, maybe not quite that much, maybe 7 to 10. And then I'll be adding other ingredients. So for now, I'm going to go away again, and I'll come back when I'm doing the next step. So I'm back. We're getting ready to take the paella out. It's the royal we. I'm getting ready to take the paella out of the oven and add the final ingredients and put it back in for just a little while. I've started on the rosé a little early. So I'm going to take, it's been in there for about 12 minutes. I'm going to take it out and assemble the rest of the ingredients. Ooh, this looks really wonderful. All right, so you can see that. I'm now going to take the peas and sprinkle the peas across the top. I'm going to sprinkle olives. I love olives. I can put olives in almost anything. Then I'm going to put some shrimp in there. This is a healthy amount of protein, by the way. Probably more than I need. Okay, and then I'm getting my hands wet and dirty, but don't worry about it. It's my kitchen. You take the chorizo and you kind of push it down into the paella at various points around. So you're just nestling the chorizo in to make sure that it's relatively evenly distributed. A little out near the edges. You want to make sure that when you dish it out, everybody, well, it's just me, but you know, obviously this is enough for an army. Everybody gets a little bit of everything. All right. I don't want to waste that lovely oil. Let me wash my hand. All right. Now I'm going to put this back in the oven for about 7 minutes and bring it out. Now, if you had too much liquid, what you would notice when you took it out of the oven a minute ago is you would still see the liquid. But in this case, it's actually just the perfect amount of liquid. So I'm going to put it back in the oven now for about 7 minutes. Then I'm going to take it out, and it has to sit for 10 or 15 minutes before you serve it. Now, when you bring it out of the oven the last time, if there's still liquid, if you notice that there's still liquid in there, and you can actually take a spoon and open it up and look to see if all the liquid has been absorbed. If it hasn't, put it on the stove, turn the stove on high, and let it cook for a little while longer. And actually, I might do that anyway, just to make sure that I get a nice browning on the bottom of the paella, because you want that crust, that socorat on the bottom. So I'm going to go away again, and I'll be back in about 10 minutes-ish. All right, I'm back. Take another sip of rosé. I'm gonna go ahead and take it out of the oven. And I always turn the oven off when I say something like that because otherwise I'll wake up tomorrow morning and my oven will have been on for 12 hours. That looks absolutely amazing. I am going to take a little spoon and just see where the liquid is. There's just a tiny bit of liquid in there. So what I'm going to do is turn that on high. I'm going to let it cook for just a few minutes to make sure that the last little bit of liquid is absorbed and evaporated. And then I'm going to move the camera to another part of my kitchen, plate it up so you can see what the final product looks like. So thank you for being so patient through my paella cooking demo, and I'll be back in just a few minutes with the final piece of the puzzle. So, see you in a minute. Well, as you can see, I am back. I have plated everything up, so this is a marvelous meal, if I do say so myself. The paella is perfect. When I plated it up, you'll notice the beautiful sokrat from the bottom, the crispy, dark wonderfulness that you get at the bottom of a good paella. I find with this that it's great to have fresh lemon to squeeze over it. It gives it just an amazing lift. Trick on lemons, instead of cutting them the way you normally do, lay them long ways, like this way, and slice just off center and then in half. And what you get is a beautiful wedge of lemon that doesn't have all that pith in it. So that's just a little lemon trick. I'm serving it today with a nice crispy side salad. I made a quick mustard lemon vinaigrette and sprinkled that over the salad. Of course, I'm serving it with the rosé. This would go well with any full-bodied white wine that's not too oaky, but also probably a nice lighter-bodied, more fruity red wine, like a lighter-bodied Pinot Noir, maybe a New World Pinot. But even if you go for a Joven Rioja with this, something that's not too tannic, that's not going to compete too much with the food, but that has some fruit in it. So because this is a beautiful meal with almost any wine, but I think rosé, light reds, or full-bodied whites without oak would go really well with this. So having said that, thank you for joining me on my paella journey. This is my first time ever doing a recipe from beginning to end and then editing it together. So hopefully it works, but if not, I'll try again with something else. But in the meantime, I'm going to have lunch now, a little bit late, and enjoy this. And if you have any questions, please get in touch with me, and I would be happy to answer them. So until next time, cheers. And now I'm going to dig into this lunch. Thank you.